It is TAW Unwrapped. We are live for the first time. That is terribly exciting, and I'm joined by my most exciting friends, I would say. Adam Smith, Craig Hannan, and friend of the stars, Kev Reilly. Knows all the footballers. He'll tell you all about it. Maybe live. What are we going to do if he doesn't? It is really exciting. Thanks a lot for those of us who are joining you live. If you are, I will try and bring in some of the chat, but I'm doing the best we can at the moment. We're trying to make everything happen. But this show is about our squad, and in particular, the breakup of a title-winning squad. I was going to call it, Dude, Where's My Title-Winning Squad? But I thought that might be confusing. If you're not a huge fan of the films, like obviously we are, great, brilliant stuff. But it's just interesting to me, chaps, that it feels quite rare to have a situation like we have at the moment where so many of that title-winning squad have been moved on already. So I did some maths, did some number crunching, did some really deep research into footballers who played for Liverpool 2 years ago. And since Liverpool won the league 15 months ago it was, 9 first-team players have left the club. So you've got Luis Diaz, Darwin Núñez, Joel Quansah, Kevin Kelleher, Trent Alexander-Arnold, Curtis Jones, Andy Robertson, Ibrahima Konate, and Mo Salah. So if we were to add Cody Gakpo to that, who is set to leave, and Harvey Elliott, who spent last season on loan and looks set to leave again. That's a pretty good first 11 of players who won the league and are no longer at the club. We should obviously mention as well the tragic passing of Diego Jota, who is no longer with us at all, which is obviously, deeply sad, more than sort of anything else, talking about it from a football point of view. But it does mean that if Cody Gakpo does leave, 4 of the other senior forwards who were on the books that season will have all moved on, only leaving Federico Chiesa, which I don't think anyone would have picked of the ones there. Just one notable game of the team that lost the Carabao Cup final in Arne Slot's first season. So the team who played against Newcastle about 18 months ago, only 4 of the first 11 remain. So the questions I want to ask, well, there's a few questions, but is any of this desirable? Was it any of this desirable, Adam? Was it necessary? What do you think about that? And were you surprised when I laid out the facts in quite the beautiful way I did?
Yes, I think just in terms of purely the numbers, it is a lot of people to lose from a title-winning squad. But I think what makes it slightly more complicated is that I think you can look at each name on that list and go, yeah, I can understand why the club have decided to sell them. Like, there's not one of them there where you go, unbelievable. I guess.
Well, it should be said as well, 2 of them have chose to leave.
Well,
so we could argue
yes.
Trent.
So Trent is obviously the one where you would go, we all wish Alexander-Arnold was still there, especially given the right-back problems we've been having, etc. But if a player decides to intentionally run down his contract so that he can effectively force a departure from the club, there's nothing the club can do in that situation. So that is the one where you go, yeah, maybe we'd like him around. Konate, it's clear that the club wanted him to stay. There was the point at which the news broke, it looks like he's going to be signing a new contract, and then the next thing we know, he's left. But again, if he didn't feel like the club was offering what he thought was parity for what he was worth, there's not a lot you could do. So you go down the list, and all of them, Luis Diaz, I think if somebody had said to you, I've gone forward a year and Luis Diaz's legs fall off, you wouldn't go, well, I never would have seen that coming. Do you know what I mean? Like, it wouldn't have been totally surprising. As it happened, he's gone to Germany and absolutely tore it up. Is the German league easier than the Premier League, and therefore it's a little bit different when you're playing for Bayern Munich in Germany than when you're playing for Liverpool? Yeah, of course. But there are no names on there where you go, I cannot believe we've not fought tooth and nail to keep them at the club. So that in itself, in isolation, the names, I don't really have a problem with any of them, because they either forced their way out or it was probably the right time to let them go. But when you look at the sheerly the numbers and the fact that we haven't done anywhere near enough to replace the outgoings and maybe have a little bit of overlap, maybe have a year where you've got Luis Diaz and you've got the player you want to replace Luis Diaz at the club at the same time. Like those sorts of things. So one can, I suppose it's a little bit like any other job. It's helpful if you can learn the ropes with somebody who's done the role. If you guys bring somebody in here, you would try to do it at the point where there's a weak overlap between them and the person who's leaving the role, so they can teach them things. So football's a little bit different from that because of tactics, etc., etc. But it's still a job, and it's still something where you've got to learn the way to do things. So yeah, I think that when you break it down person by person, no problem with any of the departures. When you look at the overall number of departures and the complete lack of incomings, that's when the problems arise.
Yeah, Adam makes some really good points there, Craig, and particularly with regard to the incomings. And for you, is it a case of the fact that they've not replaced them well enough? Is it a case of that we've not replaced them with enough quality or enough quantity, or is there a fundamental problem that if you get rid of so many players and replace them, even if the players are great, you're going to have some issues, at least in the short term?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of everything, but I think if I look at so I can only use the two Premier League sides, the two Liverpool sides who have won the Premier League as an example. And if you look at both of them, what they both have is continuity going into the following season. And so if Liverpool then win the league and they're at this point where stock's at their highest, I think what they've done strategically is thought we will use this moment to essentially maybe not overhaul. I don't think they had planned this to the extent of the overhaul that's happened here. But I think they've looked at it and gone, this is the point at which we are most likely to get Alexander Isak, and that's a player that we really like, or Florian Wirtz or whatever. I think what surprised me is that it's not just an overhaul in personnel, but at the time it was an overhaul in how we play, and it's almost like Liverpool have reached the top, and then rather than build on how they got to the top, they've decided that they would rip it all apart and that they would start again. And so, there was a lot of talk, and I know Carragher mentioned it in the on Monday Night Football the other night about the idea of building a dynasty. If you look at dynasties over the years and you think of, obviously Man United under Alex Ferguson, you think of Man City, what they have, the correlation through all of this is that they are continually replacing players as they go rather than choosing one summer to do it almost totally. And then it's the impact that last year then has on this year. So, me and Paddy Fitz have been talking over the summer, and it was interesting that Carragher mentioned it because Paddy Fitz has been saying it to me quite a bit. He's been saying about, one bad window can be disastrous because it can have an impact on the following. And if you look at some of the players that have left, so, a lot of these, as you mentioned, as Adam mentioned, were decisions. So Liverpool have made decisions on Nunez, on Quansah, on Kelleher, on Jones. There are things obviously out of their control, Jota being the main one, but you think of even Luis Diaz. Luis Diaz wanted to leave the previous summer. Robertson, runs down his contract. But Salah's an interesting one because the impact that the sale of a player can have on another, and I use Mohamed Salah as this, so we lose Trent. Now that's obviously out of our decision, but we sign, say, Florian Wirtz and we sign Isak, and we decide that we're going to play a little bit differently up top. That has an impact on Mohamed Salah, and then the season that Mohamed Salah has last season ultimately sees him leave Liverpool. You can talk about everything around slot, but if Mohamed Salah was scoring goals for Liverpool, even close to what he was doing in previous seasons, then he would still be at the club. And so it's almost like the domino effect that one bad window has. And some of the decisions that they've made are, decisions that they have decided on, and some of them have been ones that have been out of their control at the time. And then there's been this ripple effect that's run into this season. That's what I think.
Yeah, Craig used the word necessary there a couple of times, Kevin. I think that's what maybe a little bit of it comes down to. And if we had the people who were making these decisions in the room, they might say, yeah, it was a lot. We accept it was a lot, but we felt it was necessary in terms of building the next team. And you can go back to that summer, but arguably you should sort of go back even further, really, where there's the summer before where there isn't a sporting director, and we've got Big George Schmacker doing deals from Ibiza, and listen, they got some good players in, but it wasn't necessarily with the idea of squad building, or there wasn't really much done in terms of contracts and things like that. He was a guy brought in to do deals to give us a new midfield, and he did that. And so as a hired gun, you can say he sort of did a pretty good job. But we seem to have a long period without necessarily a sporting director, and so it goes back a little bit further than 2 summers ago. It goes back even further than that, really, into this period where Michael Edwards had left, and then we have a little bit of Julian Ward, and he goes, and then they're looking for the replacement, and in the end, Edwards comes back and things like that, and it just shows really, Craig talked about having one bad window and how that can affect you. It's almost kind of like a year where there isn't anyone with their eye on the future, and at the time it doesn't feel like necessarily a problem because it's the future and everything's great, and it's like going down a hill with no brakes. You're like, oh, we're going really fast, this is brilliant, but you're not necessarily sort of thinking about it. And I wonder how much almost that year has had a knock-on effect as much as the summer where they splashed loads of cash.
Yeah, it does. It does feel like a strategy that's extremely myopic, and the shift is really substantial, because when we decide to do this shift, whether it's because Jurgen's left and his stamp on the team is being broken up, or whether it's because the way that we want to recruit is different. The fact that it's difficult to go and buy a Yakuba Minteh from Brighton unless it's £80 million. There's been a big substantial shift in how we seem to be doing deals, because I like the list of players that have come out, but like the notable young talent is like Carvalho, Vandenberg, Morton, who's doing great at Lyon, Gannon Doak. And yeah, I'm not saying they were going to be superstars, but it seemed to be a shift in that the club were a bit like, it's not just these lads who have featured in a Premier League winning side and a Carabao Cup final side. It's also a shift in strategy to maybe bringing in young players that we can blood through to actually perform for Liverpool and do something for Liverpool, and either sell those on or keep them, and they're great. Where I have a slight bit of concern, or a big bit of concern about it, is the sort of factors within the club that are going on at the moment. The sale of the club, Edwards leaving, and the sporting director leaving. So that strategy, could have worked out if we had a long-term sporting director and a long-term, bunch of suits that were overseeing the project, and it was over a number of years rather than so quickly. Mike Gordon's had to step in now, and he's probably involved with how we're working in the market now. And did they imagine that would be the situation back in January? Yeah, maybe they did, but it's another bit of work. It's almost like they're giving themselves much more work to do. I think the issue that I have with it is that it's affected Liverpool's ability to function as a team, and that's what the lads are saying. Like, the chemistry of the team is broken, the partnerships within the team is then broken. So if you sell Trent and keep Salah, you've lost the Trent Salah partnership. If you sell Konate and keep Van Dijk, you've lost that partnership. Robertson and Diaz, all these partnerships across the team are gone, and it's not just a footballing partnership. I've heard people talk on shows about, like Munoz coming in and sort of being mates with Maka. That's a thing, and Weerts and Isak are developing a relationship on the pitch, but I'm sure they're developing one off the pitch. They're having lunch together, they're hanging out a lot. And that's really important. You can't, it feels very Football Manager to me to just go in and it's fun in the game. I love doing that in the game when you get your first team and you're like ripping them apart. You're like shite, put someone else in. But it doesn't work like that. You can't just replace a player who's a 7 out of 10 with a player who's an 8 out of 10 and just expect it to fully work. And that's where I've got a little bit of sympathy with some of the players like Weerts. Obviously, Isak's had the injury, so I won't include him. But Weerts, he's got to get to grips with a new system, a new manager after the previous one's just gone. After a team has had a really, really difficult summer last year after the tragedy and everything, a lot of turmoil, a lot of upheaval. We're asking an awful lot of the players. It just seems like that's not really being considered, that the cohesion and the chemistry within the team hasn't really been considered. And I think that's where my biggest concern is, especially when the sporting director is going to be off in a week. That's concerning.
What do you think they'll announce it? I won't put you on the spot for that. I've been thinking about it a lot and how they do it.
It's interesting.
Mo Salah put out quite a famous tweet. When Mo Salah speaks, people listen. He drops bombs on social media. But the one that's popped into my mind was after the summer we had last year, and one of these Anfield Twitter accounts, I get them all confused. I'm like, are they the baddies? But one of these, I mean, obviously the Anfield rap are the great guys, are the heroes of this story. But one of the Anfield Twitter accounts put out, so is this the biggest upgrade in history, with a 9 and a 7, and pictures of Darwin Núñez and Luis Diaz against Foreign versus Isaac. And Mo Salah quoted it, basically saying, put some respect on the lads who've won the league. And the reason I was thinking about it was he was obviously talking to, well, it seemed to be talking to the supporters in that case, but I wonder whether he was talking a little bit to his bosses as well, with this idea of, these lads are really good, and they help me a lot, and they help me perform, and I wonder whether, looking back, was it as much taking aim at the people who were selling them as it was maybe the fans who were getting all excited about players we hadn't seen kick a ball for Liverpool yet?
Maybe. I think that's probably a bit of what's it called, retro, like coming up with a thing. There's a word for it, isn't there, when people like add a meaning to something from the past that didn't exist at the time. I don't know whether it's a little bit that. I think, let's just say he probably didn't mind the double meaning, even if he didn't intend it. Quite a long time ago, I wrote a play and I got Ian Salmon to read it. And Ian Salmon was like, "Oh, I love the bit at the end where this happened," and it was obviously a reference to the thing that happened earlier in the play. And I was like, yes, it was. Yes, it was a reference to that. And you can imagine, like Mo Salah, he was just basically saying, some of you fans are knobheads.
Yeah.
And someone's going, yeah, and the owners as well you're talking to there. And he might would have been like, yeah, I was sticking the boot in them too. When he may not have meant it at the time. But I think it's perfectly okay for us to look at it and go, have the club respected that title winning squad? And I think where we have found ourselves now is football is in a really different position than it was. Like, last season, Arsenal won the league, fine, fair enough. That was a league that Manchester United could have won during the Ferguson years. And what I mean by that is, Ferguson never had to get 98 points to win a Premier League title. He never had to get 100 points to win a Premier League title. He never had to do that. So he could have a squad that had Darren Fletcher and Wes Brown and, you name your bang average Manchester United player that has got 4 or 5 Premier League titles to the name. You could have squads that were full of quite average players, actually, and they would win titles. And it didn't mean that, because the whole of it together worked, but they were winning titles with like 78 points and things. Give Jurgen Klopp a 78-point winning Premier League title, we'd have been kings of the world for the entire time he was here. Football improved. Everybody had to level up to be able to challenge for the title. And that meant that the squad players had to get significantly better. We've maybe dropped down a level now, back to those Manchester United Premier League winning years, if you like. And I think now the squad players that you can have don't need to be absolute world beaters. They don't need to be the best players you've ever seen. Darwin Núñez was a very good squad player for Liverpool.
So was Curtis Jones.
Curtis Jones, a great example, right? We've obviously just let him go, and I think that is maybe partly to do with his own ego and his own whatever. But I think personally that we're in a really weird middle ground at the moment where the squad players are demanding the wages of people who are exceptional players. I think Curtis Jones is a great player. I'm really sad he's left the football club. I don't think he was worth 150 grand a week or whatever it is that he was demanding in comparison to other players. So I think it's very difficult now to look at the squad and go, what do we need? Well, what do we need in this squad at the moment? Because do we need the players that are like Curtis Jones, that are like Wes Brown, that will fill a squad, fill a place, and be able to come on and replace it, and you drop down from maybe an 8 out of 10 to a 6 out of 10, but that's okay because that's where the Premier League is at the moment? Or do we need a squad that we needed in the 99-point season, where everybody needs to be able to come in and be at a 9 out of 10 every single game, because if you drop a point, you're done. Like that, where are we? What do they need? So I feel like everybody's just got a little bit confused, because the players who would be decent squad players are demanding wages that are for like the best players in the country, and the best players in the country, well, they don't want to be a squad player. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it just feels like so absolute people. The problem is people, and I very much include myself in this, are knobheads. And Mo Salah was absolutely right to say you should put respect on their name. The problem is he was doing that on Twitter, where everyone is a lunatic, right? Everyone's a lunatic that's still on that platform, IMO. You're calling out people who are the online fan base, but we've all been in Anfield hearing people slagging off, Jordan Henderson. I will slag him off now because of the decisions that he made after his Liverpool career. But when he played for Liverpool, he was a brilliant captain and an excellent player. But I've been at Anfield with people who've slagged off his every single touch. So we can't just pretend it's the online fan base. But people are mental, so you can't, Mo almost lowered himself to their level by talking about it, if you know what I mean. And but the owners, the higher ups, I just don't think they know what kind of squad they're trying to put together.
Yeah, and it's a really good point at the end there about this idea of what squad we are trying to put together, really, and whether the people who are trying to put together have got any experience of doing so. And I think when Liverpool have been at the best, there's been that sort of combination between Klopp and Edwards, and apparently they used to butt heads quite a lot, and apparently get quite lively at the AXA, and the story was, leave your doors open when they were arguing because it's very entertaining. But there was two people who cared and two people who had probably different sort of points of view. Most famously on contracts, Klopp felt that players, he wanted to sort of keep them on, he wanted to keep that experience within the squad, he wanted to keep the leadership, and then he had the data people say, well the numbers have sort of dropped off and we only think it's getting any worse and they're not worth the money. And you had this kind of healthy, I think, sort of debate. That the problem seems to have come since, Craig, which is that first of all Edwards left, and then Klopp, took hold of the reins and apparently sort of had more power and things like that, but it was just too much. So whether you think that's right or wrong for a manager to have that much say in the running of a football club, from a workload point of view, I think it obviously took it out of him and he felt he had to leave. But then it feels like we've swung the other way now, and they've given people who have got very little experience in managing or coaching this idea of them operating the squad. And I worry that there's not a person in the room enough who's going, yeah, but you don't really understand how a team works. You need these people who are going to do the dirty work, or you need these squad players who come in and do a really good job for you. You're trying to almost fill the team with superstars, and you haven't got anyone who's sweeping up.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue here is that it was, if you go back to last summer, it was people who either aren't here at the club anymore or are about to leave the club making decisions around footballers for a manager who is also no longer here. And they've tried to have this upheaval and this change the way of playing from what the title winning team, how the title winning team sort of approached games, and what our Liverpool team looked like. And then we moved away from that and then sort of lost our identity. And now we find ourselves with a new manager who has a really strong identity in terms of the way that which he plays. But we are also left with the footballers that we purchased last summer who, if we're all being honest about it, if we look back, and this is a little bit of hindsight, and I've tried not to be. I've tried, a couple of things that I wrote down before this was try to be logical and not emotional around these footballers and try to not look back with hindsight. But I remember, whilst being really excited about the number of players and the fact that these were marquee players, I had two worries at the time, and one was I constantly thought of Liverpool in 14-15 when we signed loads of footballers to try and replace Luis Suarez, and it didn't work. I thought of Tottenham when they tried to do it with Bale.
Don King mentions that, yeah. Tottenham, yeah.
And then I'm watching Tottenham this summer and I'm going, don't get too excited because I've just watched Liverpool do it last summer. And so there was this worry around the churn. but also was a little bit worried around what these signings meant for the style of the football, in that I was looking at them and thinking, I'm not sure whether these players would have fitted into how the best Liverpool sides I've ever watched would have. Now, that is obviously part of transition, and that is part of what the hierarchy and the manager last season, the head coach will say, is that they were trying to build towards something new, and that they had a new way of playing, and that's what they wanted to do. The problem is that hasn't worked, and so we find ourselves in another transfer window where we've got these footballers who sort of have to work. Like Wirtz and Isak has to work. They both cost 240 million or whatever it is total. They have to work. But then if I look at the way in which Iraola plays, I'm not sure whether if you said to him, you've got that amount of money, do you want to sign these two footballers? I'm not sure he would go for those two footballers.
I mean, I'm not sure how to slot would that be.
No, so you can see where all of this, and if you... I think the biggest issue is all of these people either aren't here or are about to not be here. And what's jarring for me is that if I look at the most successful Liverpool sides and I look at how they were built, it was over time and it was bit by bit. And it was the transformer here. Transformer wasn't always, by the way, transformer was never always the obvious option. Like Alisson, was he obvious at the time? I'm not sure you'd say he was obvious. Salah certainly wasn't.
Well, Alisson came to us, Rome conceded 5 goals, so don't think anyone was walking out saying we need to get that keeper in.
Yes, now Van Dijk was the best in the league, so that is one. Fabinho, I wouldn't say he was a transformer, but he wasn't the obvious defensive midfielder. None of us were talking about him. So Liverpool have then gone to this place where the footballers that they signed last summer and the ones they're going for this summer in Barcola feel like they were the obvious ones from the very beginning. But also add to that the fact that Liverpool went against their strategy in terms of Ian Graham talked about the optimal number of players coming in each summer. Jurgen Klopp used to talk about his ideal summer is just promoting from within. So that's all focused around continuity, and I think it was 2 to 3 footballers. I look back at every sort of Premier League winning team to see the average of how many players were brought in, and it was 4. And if you look at the players that they brought in and that left, there weren't many occasions where it was players within the spine. It was very much around this core group of players that they wanted to move forward. But Liverpool have completely gone against that.
Does it give you a greater appreciation of players who just make a tick? Do you think it should give whoever it is who's going to continue building this Liverpool team an appreciation of that? I remember a lot of people took the mick out of Arne Slot last year when he said, Isak's problem is he hasn't got this Jacob Murphy. He's that well known, I'm not even sure to do his first name. But you sort of knew what he was saying. These players do help a football team and have done in every successful football team that Liverpool have had. And I feel like at the time we maybe didn't appreciate them enough, and I sort of feel even more about it now.
Yeah, I think the makeup of a squad is built from sort of like different groups, excuse me, of players. So, your superstars like Mo Salah, and then they're at the very top because they sort of win you matches. Virgil van Dijk and Alisson don't concede many goals when we win the title, and that's how we win the title. So they're at the very sort of tippy top, and they've got the individual quality. And then you've got these sort of structural players who help facilitate the system. And for me, this is where we're lacking currently as a squad. We don't really have these players who make things tick. Wijnaldum's revered. He wasn't necessarily like scoring loads of goals and just like unbelievable. He was just a structural player who really, really helped us tick. And there's loads of value in that. Jordan Henderson is in the same, like Adam's just been talking about. The other sort of group is like the players that glue things together, and they might be your older heads like Milner and Henderson in terms of understanding the club's culture and the values of the city and helping drum that into people. And then beyond that, you've sort of got the young prospects like Rio. And I think that most teams are made up from those different groups. And I think that you're right in that the higher ups or the suits or whatever you want to call them have went at this at a really analytical sort of standpoint and not really taken that into account. I get why Jurgen Klopp was like, I want to renew Jordan Henderson. Because I ended up being that guy when we could have renewed Robbo, and we were all talking about leadership within the squad and lacking. And, Chelsea have just went out and brought in Jordan Henderson. I can't imagine that he's probably going to get too many games. They didn't buy him for his legs and what he can do on the field. Of course they did in certain circumstances, but the main reason was probably for the training ground, for when they're sitting around having dinner and lunch, when they're travelling, how he can bring through, young players and help them realise the sort of arduous lifestyle of a successful footballer. The people at the club still talk about Milner, in such glowing terms. And I think Arne Slot said last season, I don't know much about the guy, but I hear about his standards quite often. And that's the sort of legacy that I want from like older players. So, it's not just about people who make the team tick on the pitch for me. It's those sort of players as well. If Van Dijk ends up having a worse season than last season, God forbid, I'd still want him to hang around because he's Virgil van Dijk. And there's so much value in that. Alisson's a different one because he's a goalkeeper and maybe you can't... You don't know. I heard the manager talking about him not being able to affect the players on the pitch as much as being a vice-captain because of his position and all that sort of stuff. I think the players ticking thing is something that's massively been overlooked, and I think that's where we're lacking, particularly sort of in midfield. We've given all the money to Gravenberch, we've given all the money to Szoboszlai, and we're still. I know it's really early in the season, but we've still got these questions like, oh yeah, does that really fit structurally, and how we want the team to work, particularly when Andoni Iraola is the manager and he wants very specific things from his midfield. I think it's all really interesting that it has been sort of. It appears to be done from this really sort of analytical standpoint, and there does need to be a lot more human emotion into it. And I think that's exactly what Jurgen Klopp gave us. It wasn't just the great coach; it was the understanding of human beings within a football team that essentially are a family, and that's what we were. And I just hope that we don't lose that really.
And that sort of erosion of culture, because you lose personnel and you lose leadership, and even maybe the way in which the players are managed. I'm not someone who wants to necessarily look back on Arne Slot and sort of try to dig him out or whatever. You won a Premier League for me, and we've got a new manager now, so I'm not someone who sort of instinctively wants to do that. But I think that if we compare to the culture that sort of Jurgen had created and that was there at the beginning of his reign, everyone felt very much part of it, even if they weren't playing. And so what then happens is, if players don't feel as if they're either part of it or feel like they've got a future within it, then what happens is the culture begins to erode, and the players that have been part of cultivating that culture leave. So I use Robertson as an example. I think if Robertson played more minutes last season, here and there, at times when we felt he maybe should have and could have, there's a world in which you're able to talk him into staying for another season. Now, whether people think that's right or wrong, but he was a cultural architect, and so if we're talking about the erosion of culture, that's there. There's what happens with Salah. There's various sort of aspects and players that you can look at and points within all of this that see the culture get to where it is, and that's not something from the outside that we're discussing as a potential issue. That's something that literally Robertson was coming out and saying on Instagram, and talked about it in interviews. Salah did the same. We saw it all over last season, what had happened, that there seemed to be, they'd gone from this family to this point where everything was disjointed. So it's the impact that all of these decisions have, both in the short term and the long term, within that idea of squad building, because ultimately what happens is players leave rather than you getting to choose whether they leave, in the way that Michael Edwards was able to do with Wijnaldum and Henderson and so on.
What's really interesting as well is McAllister last season. We all know that he had his worst season possibly in his career last season, but it's the same season that Darwin leaves. And they were good mates, weren't they? I think Taffarel leaves, and there's a little bit of a loss. Luis Diaz leaves. There's a loss of that sort of South American or Spanish-speaking contingent. And I do wonder if, obviously his performances on the pitch weren't great because of systemic issues and also possibly fitness issues, him carrying an injury and whatnot. But that sort of thing can get in your head, and it's like at work when your best mate leaves, and you're just a bit like, why am I still here? This is a bit rubbish. And I wonder how much of that can be considered. I've mentioned it before, but you see Munoz sitting there with McAllister, and that's what that's about. While they can't learn the language, it's important to sort of sit them down and have that connection as well. And that's a bit of an erosion of culture in a way. It might not be Liverpool's culture, but to teach people how the club is, everything about it, what it means to play for Liverpool, isn't just done on the pitch. And I wonder if that's something that's also not being considered by the higher ups.
Do you know how the South American lads used to meet up for a barbecue, like every now and again? Do you meet up with Kev from the Handyman and drink loads of Tennants? Just to and talk about home, every few weeks.
I've not met him yet, but I feel
like this is me specifically with all Scots people know each other.
Yeah, again.
Do you know John Lennon? He's a great fella. I was expected to talk about him on this show.
I've got a mate who knows him, but if he gets Tennants in the Handyman, I will be in there every single day because I love it.
Can't believe he hasn't. Minus 10 Scottish points for Kev from the Handyman. Lovely man. Hope you're well. He almost certainly won't be listening for your sports hearts. Anyway, we're going to hear from Dom King now, who I caught up with yesterday on this very subject. But first of all, I want to do a quick paid ad for BetterHelp. So whether you're coming back from holidays, a busy period, or just feeling a little bit out of sync as you mentally prepare for September, it can take time to find your rhythm again, a bit like Liverpool. But in this period, we often forget to make time for ourselves. So consider looking after your mental health part of your routine too. Because therapy doesn't have to be something you only turn to in crisis. It can be one way of regularly checking in with yourself and building better habits to support your well-being. Nearly half of BetterHelp members in the UK are trying therapy for the first time. So if you've been thinking about therapy, you're far from alone. With more than 6,000 qualified therapists across the UK, BetterHelp helps connect people with support that fits their needs and preferences. So as you settle back into your routine, don't forget to make time for yourself too. Visit betterhelp.com/TAW. Here is me talking to Dom King, and we'll be back in the room after that. So Dom, today we're talking about the squad and the breakup of the squad, and for me, the more I think about it, the more remarkable it is how quickly things have changed in terms of who we got available, and it's how many months is it since they won the league title? Would you say 15? Let's do some sort of quick maths.
Yeah, it is 15.
It's 15 months until the best days of all our lives when we're coming out of Anfield. It's a sea of red. It's a fantastic day in the sunshine, and we're all feeling incredible about winning the title, and also a little bit about what's to come for this team. What can we add to it that's gonna mean it's not just one title, but a period where we can win a few. Since then, you look around at the team, and there's so many gone and more to go. We look at it, Cody Gakpo, and it's like Gakpo leaving or being set to leave that's sort of triggered this conversation for me, really, because you think about someone like Virgil, who used to know his teammates so well, and he's in a completely different back four now. Now, the club might say that two of those they'd have liked to have kept. So Trent, I think certainly they would have kept if he'd have wanted to stay. Canate, a little bit more complicated, but if for the right deal for the club, I think they would have certainly kept it. Whether they were willing to pay him the wages that he wanted, it would unclear on. But I think you sense that it was in Liverpool's, desire to keep both of those. But Andy Robertson has now moved on, and then the forwards, it's a completely different forward line. Obviously, what happens to Diogo Jota was a tragedy, and whether he'd still be at the club now, otherwise we sort of don't know. But they sold Diaz, they sold Nunes, who Mo Salah loved playing with. Regardless of sort of what you think of him, Salah loved playing with him. Salah himself has obviously moved on, and now Cody. So you're thinking they're five forwards with Diogo who are no longer at the club, really. And then there's plenty of other younger players, squad players who sort of moved on as well. It's a big chunk of that team, and I can never think of anything like it, really. That sometimes a team sometimes with a team, you need to rip it up and start again. But normally it's when there's a problem. Normally when it's completely failed and a new manager comes in and wants a big clear out. Well, that wasn't a failing team; it was a title-winning team. You could say that it was an age profile where we needed refreshing, but you can't tell me that. Luis Diaz was ready to sort of hang up his boots. It doesn't look like Cody Gakpo, is necessarily. There's younger players who are being moved on as well, and it's just a strange situation. And I can't think about many parallels, not even in Liverpool's history, but generally in football where that has happened.
And the manager as well.
Yeah,
the managers went as well. No, it's. I remember speaking to you in the June, just after. I think. Who had they just signed? I think it was just after Wirtz, after they signed Florian Wirtz, and it was before a lot of the sales had started to kick in. And I said to you that, to me, it was the start of a recruitment drive to add the Champions League to it. I knew there would be some level of change, but I didn't anticipate quite the breadth and depth of it that's happened. It does almost feel like you're looking at a completely new team. And the hard thing for this team, in some respects, is coming in where they're all trying to work together. We don't know the ceilings of their capabilities, but they're trying to maintain a level that had been that's still so fresh in everybody's mind. The beauty of the Klopp generation, if we could call them that, that was added to by Anna. They all arrived at the sweet spot in their careers where they were absolutely ferociously ambitious to achieve something, to reach the next level, to go through walls. They arrived at Liverpool knowing that they still had it all to prove. And one of the things that I've wondered about over the last 15 months, because that's what we're talking about, is whether people have come in and appreciated what is needed, what it means.
Yeah.
Liverpool isn't the end of the destination. It's the place where you go again. And I was talking to Virgil about this on Sunday at Newcastle, and he agreed with the point about that you arrive at Liverpool and this is where you go to. He's got faith that he sees them every day. He's got faith that they will in time be ready to carry the mantle on. But the changes happened that quickly that I'm still not sure whether. I still think there's a small percentage that haven't actually appreciated winning the league. I think of fans, I think they just sort of took it for granted that this is what Liverpool have been doing for the last 10 years. They challenged Man City and we got over the line this time. It was easy and we'll do it again. And maybe that's totally wrong. And people will no doubt get in touch with me and tell me I'm talking nonsense with that. But I don't know about you, but do you see where I'm coming from? When some people, I'm not sure they fully appreciated the joy of that day at Anfield and the day when they collected the trophy.
I think they enjoyed it. I think it was just.
I'm talking about the wider world. I don't mean like the people who were in Anfield, because I've seen things in Anfield that day that will stay with me forever. The sort of it's behind us here. That picture to me is everything about it. That's the bridging of the generations. Hannan and Virgil van Dijk. That to me was the symbolising of the generation that we'd grown up on, perhaps seen a little bit, heard stories about, and then it was connected. It was connected by the ones that my kids were there and taking everything in. That to me was everything it was about. But now it genuinely does feel at times like you're watching a completely new club.
Yeah, and the more you try and change, the harder it is to connect generations. And it's funny because sometimes when a team gets a few new players, the new players look a bit out of place. Whereas now I see Alisson, he looks... It's like Ray Clemens coming out or Bruce Gobillard or something like that. It's like he's from a completely different kind of generation or time. You know, he's almost like oh fucking hell, Alan's still here. Like, and he feels like he's looking around like almost kind of surprised, and that's, I think, a sign of when a lot has been changed and maybe too much has been changed too quickly, when it's actually the older players who look a bit like kind of lost and a bit out of place.
Because that's a really good point, because a lot is asked of the older players. Like, you've got to look at Virgil and Alisson as the examples. Probably, will we say the two best pieces of transfer business in this century, from 2000 to 2026? When you think
how they transformed the team.
Yeah, and they were bought with the Coutinho money. They both came because they sold Coutinho. And what they've done. So we've seen them become, in my view, I've never changed on this. Alisson's the best I've seen. The best I've seen in the Premier League, the best I've seen at Liverpool. I know there's other people will argue the Ray Clemens one with me, but to me, he is absolutely exceptional. But he's reached the age now where his form's not going to be as good, his fitness isn't going to be as good. So he's trying to concentrate on keeping himself at the best that he can be. But yet he's expected to bring everybody with him to get to the standards that he helped set, as well as maintain everything else that's going on around the club. It's a huge, huge ask. Like, you know, while he knows the hardest thing is like making sure he's ready to perform every week. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, no, it is, and it's where.
And the same with Virgil. Virgil's coming out every single week and taking it on his shoulders for every bad performance, and he's the one who's getting all the questions about. You know, he's the one who stops in the mix zone for us every single week. He's playing in a team that is set up completely differently now. He's getting attacked on. We've seen the spaces that are there on the pitch. He's got runners coming at him all the time. He's playing, there's a higher line. And all the while he's trying to think, well, how do I maintain my standards? But yet I've got to look after that, look after that. It's impossible. It's impossible. You either need people to step up around him to understand so he can ease a little bit of pressure on himself to help his own form. Or what chance does he stand?
Yeah,
because then he'll just have to in a few weeks. Virgil van Dijk's playing terrible. There'll be a discourse. There'll be discussions about it. Wherever Virgil van Dijk's not the player he was. Well, no, he's not. He's nearly 35, but he's still. It's very hard, like listening to some of the things that get said at the moment. You know, for all they helped to achieve, and it's almost like finish with that toy. What's the next one that's coming to me?
Do you think? I mean, they wouldn't necessarily admit it, but do you think privately anyone, like sporting director, Richard Hughes or whatever, would think, do you know what, we try to do too much? Because it's happened before. You know, Souness now reflects on when he was the manager and says, like, I tried to change too much too quick. And that can be the thing, you know, when you come in, you got this big job. We all know that the next Liverpool team needed to be built. So do you think they think this was necessary and everything that we've done was necessary and right? And that's not to say we've got every decision, you know, absolutely spot on, but this idea of it needed to be a revolution rather than an evolution of the team, and this is a bit of pain before the next team emerges. Or do you think they would look at it and go, do you know what, did we have to do sort of everything that we did, and have we set ourselves back with the speed that we've tried to change it?
I think it would be unfair to criticise them for the recruitment last summer, because you have to take yourself back to last summer and think about the excitement that was around the place, the city or whatever, around the fan base when these deals were being completed. When it was noted that Florian Wirtz had chosen Liverpool over Man City and Bayern Munich, it was it was incredibly. It was like Liverpool have finally done it in terms of got a world star. It's not the people who've bought him's fault that he hasn't performed yet. Same with Isak. I think every time Isak came to Anfield, you watched him and you were like, oh my God, oh my God, how good is he?
Yeah.
It's not their fault that they did the work to get it. Whether you think they've overpaid or not, they made sure that Liverpool got the players. Same with Ekitike. So I wouldn't criticise them for getting the deals done. Same with, you know, let's remember about Kerkez as well. Everybody was talking about him getting into the PFA team of the year. Everything was rosy in terms of what he was going to contribute. And I still think he'll come good at some point. He's just getting used to a new or readjusting himself to Iriola's type of football. I'm not sure the football that Slot played last year helped people, you know, settle in. But it's going to be fascinating to see how these sort of progress. But you know, sorry to come full circle, I don't think you can criticise the people who were involved in that recruitment drive for doing that recruitment. It's, as I said, nobody envisaged it turning out as it has done so far.
Not in terms of individuals, no, that's not to criticise individual signings, but I mean in terms of the volume, and this is something for us to assess. Maybe as fans, really, we think, oh, just sell him, buy him, you know, get all this in, but squad harmony and how squads gel, and the fact that there's someone, you know, I had to laugh before, someone was like, oh, how do we get the next Gini Wijnaldum? And I thought, when we had Gini Wijnaldum, half people used to moan about him. Yeah. And now everyone's like, oh, we need this Gini Wijnaldum, and you think, well, it's funny, isn't it?
Yeah.
I guess, you know, do we need to appreciate as we watch, you know, you're obviously a fan and a journalist, but as we watch as fans, you know, do we need to appreciate this idea of, well, it's not just a case of sell eight by nine. We're not playing Championship Manager. How our squad gels together and how they work together, and the hunger level and things like passing down, you know, standards and stuff like that. That comes from continuity. Yeah,
I haven't since doing this job. I want to take the Liverpool side out of it. I know from being in the industry, I've looking at clubs that have had these mad summers where they've brought 6 in or 7 in. Tottenham's a really good example after the campaign after they sold Bale, when they bought
the Beals.
Yeah,
that was what he said. Wasn't
yeah. Tottenham were one. I remember Everton in 2017 when they got Rooney and Sigurdsson and Davy Klaassen and Michael Keane and Jordan Pickford and whoever else. There's been other clubs where there's been 6, 7 arrived. Not one of them has ever had a good season after it. It's too much. It's too much churn. The best is when you can add 3 maybe, take 2 out, maybe add 3, have that, you know, the harmony, the settle, you know, that it doesn't work, the high turnover. They always say, don't they, you might laugh about this, the best pubs you go into is the ones where the staff doesn't change.
Yeah.
Because you know the pub is run smoothly, it's always, the ale's good, the food's good, the harmony in the place is good. You can take that to a football team. If you know what you're seeing on the pitch, you know the manager's in a good place, the football will be good. It'll all look after itself. But when you're having this constant revolving door, I just don't think you'll get results like that.
We get Dom to take me to one of these pubs. No, it's maybe thirsty up the Reds. We've got breaking news. This is why you go live. This is why you do live. This is exciting. There was breaking transfer news, which is really exciting. But before all that, I need to talk to you about Claude.ai, and then I promise you we're going to talk about Ismaila Sarr after that. But I'm currently doing a Masters. I'm having a bit of a breakdown on it today, to be honest with you. If anyone's done any learning, you have good days and bad days. Today's a bad one, Kev. I've got an assignment in at 5 o'clock. It might be shit, which is a real blow. But I've been looking at it for a long time, so it's probably fine. But what's been interesting about doing academia and going back into it is the fact that they are an organisation and a place that's really embraced the use of AI. So I've learned there at John Moores University, where I'm studying, when you can use it, where you can't, what you should and what you shouldn't. And for me, it's the research capabilities that are really strong, because you can feel like you're trying to find a needle in a haystack sometimes, but it finds you the most suitable peer-reviewed articles for any subject and allows you to then look into them in more depth, because it is important to do the reading for yourself. But finding those best journals has saved me hours when trying to balance it with work and family and transfers, which is obviously more important than both work and family. So I use Claude now in my work too, and with Claude Cowork you can do so much, from organising files to building spreadsheets to drafting presentations or reports from scattered notes. Claude Cowork has you covered. You can even send tasks from your phone to your desktop and have it ready for when you log on. So Claude is the AI for minds that don't stop at good enough. It's the collaborator that actually understands your entire workflow and thinks with you. Whether you're debugging code at midnight or strategizing your next business move, Claude extends your thinking to tackle the problems that matter. So for problems worth solving, get started with Claude at claude.ai/TAW and check out Claude Pro, which includes access to all the features mentioned in today's episodes and more. It'll be a lot more, I am sure, because I'm a man who's desperate to talk about wide forwards. Ismail Sarr, he's one who, I'm going to say, he's either been linked with Liverpool a lot, or a lot of Liverpool fans are going, we should look at him.
Because he scores against us all the time.
He scores against us. He's fast, he's pacey, he's quick. I know that they're all the same word, but I like all of them. He scores goals mainly against Liverpool. I mean, just that swing alone is worth £20 million, surely. But it's a bit of a gazumping as well, wasn't it? Because he was on about going abroad.
Yeah, there was links to Turkey, and there was links to, funnily enough, Al Hilal, who Richard Hughes is working for on the 1st of September.
Allegedly.
Maybe you sent it from the wrong email.
That would be so funny.
Oh shit! I forgot to log out.
But what are you meant to do? Because he's meant to be still working for Liverpool. So now he's got to front it. Now he's got to
he's going to take him on now. And we're going to get in a 28-year-old winger. He turns 29 in February. I think that's quite interesting from Liverpool.
28 till he's 29 now.
Classic.
Not finished.
Senegalese as well. I really like the stories around like how much he looked up to Manny and the connection there, and I think he's probably wanted to play for Liverpool for a long time because of that Manny, connection. A bit like. Is it Mbaye? Is Mbaye Senegalese as well?
Yes. Yep.
And there's that sort of like, there's the photos with Manny and stuff at the World Cup, and it's a bit of a triumph to sort of end up there. I can imagine as Senegalese when you've had somebody as good as Manny play for us. It's come out of nowhere. I've just had a really quick look, and I hadn't realised that he can do little bits on the left as well, which is interesting. And Iraiola's talked a little bit about wanting his wingers to be able to do both sides, but also interestingly, and I don't know how many times he can play sort of in that second striker role as well. And I've been wondering if there's a diddle that we can do where it's not just two wingers that come in, but like maybe we can get someone who does a little bit of backing up Isak as well, because we've got Rio and we've got Munoz who can do the wide left and right stuff. So it'd be good to get somebody who can do a little bit of middle stuff. But that's just because I don't think we're going to sign an out-and-out centre forward. I just don't think that we're going to put the money down on someone like that when we've got Ekitike in the building. That's just a personal thought. But yeah, really exciting, really interesting. He is pacey and he does score a lot of good goals against us, to be fair.
Pacey and quick.
He's pacey, quick and rapid.
It's one that I can get on board with. Craig, he's 28, soon to be 29. But so it's obviously not necessarily one massive for the future, but if it's not necessarily a huge price, then you can sort of cop for that, and who knows what we'd be able to get for him when he's 31, 32. The market could even be madder by then. We might make a profit. Who knows? But he's one who I think could make a real impact this season.
Yeah, absolutely. Premier League proven. I think he gets about 9 or 10 goals last season. We can all get on board with a Senegalese winger, can't we? But I think in terms of the Premier League proven piece, that was one of the bits with Menta that I was bang into. Obviously, if you look at both of them and their profiles, it's what they do as much off the ball as what they can do. They can offer Liverpool on it, and one of the things that I again was sort of behind the idea of getting Menta was that if you've got we're looking at Liverpool this week, and there's a lot of talk around players who are going to enable the others to be better, and who are going to be piano players and who are going to be piano carriers. And I think that Sarr can be a little bit of both, and enabling Wirtz and Isak to be the best version of themselves. The intensity at which he works, it aligns with what the new manager wants. I mean, you can look at it in a couple of ways. I'm excited about the idea of it. I mean, it still looks a little bit desperate. If we want to link back to what we were talking about in the first part around, squad building, we've known that Salah was going to be leaving since, pretty much January, I think it was. And here we are, sort of in the final few days, trying to get ourselves a right winger. So that doesn't look great. But in terms of the player himself, I think he can definitely do a job for Liverpool. And to also link back to the previous part of this podcast, one of the things when you look at teams who have done well in the Premier League over the past few years, it's actually their squad size and the availability of the options that they have. And Sarr is a very available footballer, and is someone that will help Munoz, in terms of having another option there. It will help Rio in terms of maybe not having to play him on the right as much, and it'll be, it should be a strong Premier League proven, option for Liverpool.
People are surprisingly negative in the comments.
You shock me.
Well, you say that, but I thought we all I thought we all agreed on new fast lads up front was good, but apparently not. And in a way, I get it. Like, people are using words like shambles and they make it up as they go along and desperate. But I'm like, yeah, it is. I know. So
it's like me and the handyman looking for tenants.
So we can all agree it doesn't look like a particularly well thought out window, and we can all agree that maybe Richard Hughes could have planned this all out better. But he's leaving in a week, so let's just get some decent players in, and that's surely better than the opposite.
Yeah, look, I my natural inclination, certainly at home when my wife gets excited about things, is to play the negative. Just bring her down to earth again and just calm things down.
That's what she married for.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the yin and the yang. And I definitely, when Andy came in and said that this the breaking news, my first thought was, what are they doing? Like, what is there? Literally no plan.
No,
is it just? Is there? Have we got? Do we know the name of a fella? Like, is that what they're going for?
They're going through like minutes of old meetings, I think. They're like, what right wingers have we talked about?
If we
when you're like, oh, what was that florist we used 3 years ago? We was that good. It's a bit like that. Who did we get? The flowers we got for your auntie. And what were they called? Let me go through the emails. If I put florist into Gmail, I'll find it. I think we've done that.
Richard, I've put right wing into the thing, and we've got Nigel Farage. I don't know. Is that what you meant? We talked about before. We got sidetracked. But that's what it feels like. It just feels like they're just plucking names out of thin air and going, who is there? And yeah, maybe Richard Hughes has gone, I mean, I was trying to sign him for Al Hilal, but I suppose I better do this. I better leave with some sort of reputation before I depart for pastures new.
There's going to be a naughty release clause for any Saudi club, isn't there?
Then he puts a really tiny print on the bottom.
Maybe he's going to go, listen, I know I've been shit last year, but what if Liverpool buys someone and then I'll buy him next year? You'll make a cool 20 mil. No one's bothered. Just as a way of saying sorry.
That's about as good as we could hope for at the moment, isn't it? Because it's just, I understand the comments. It does feel shambolic. It does feel like there's no plan, no organisation. It's just turning from one fella to the other. Maybe there is the plan of, they want Minter, but maybe the manager's gone, he is injured though, isn't he? And I said I need somebody to be able to play like now. Why are we fine? He looks great. I'm excited by bringing him in, but I can't play him for 2 months, and then he's going to have to recover from his injury. So can we try and sign someone else that I will actually be able to put on the football pitch at some point? And they've gone, what about this fella? Then we'll have him for a year and then flog him to Al Hilal after that.
I like the idea that he's been watching the World Cup and he's seen him score 4 for Senegal, and he's gone, who's he? Oh shit, Premier League experience. Yeah, we'll get him.
What's the price? 21 in all comps last season, according to one of the more positive comments comments.
In all comps, I think he did nine or 10 in the league.
Yeah.
I remember seeing that because I remember when I was looking about in the summer who could be
Maybe
signed.
all comps includes the World Cup. It's a full comp. 50 mil is the talk.
50. I mean,
mil.
you'd imagine that's the...
To 75 next summer to Richard Hughes.
Yeah, I mean, you'd imagine 50 is the top end, wouldn't you? And we come down from there. It's a bit of a shambles because obviously they've pivoted from Diomande to Mbaye to Minta to Sarr, and it does look ridiculous. It does look a bit silly, but they've sort of backed themselves into a corner because we need somebody in that position. It's interesting that we could have brought in Mbaye and if all being well, Barcola as well, and we wouldn't be too worried about Mbaye coming in because he's an exciting young Senegalese talent who's been playing for PSG and had a few appearances there. But, we draw the line at Ismaila Sarr. I mean, we've got a 19-year-old in one hand that was unproven in the Prem. We don't really know how he'd get on. And Sarr, who I know scores goals. I don't mind it, but it's not exactly the most exciting, prospect that you could have possibly. But I just want the manager to have enough options that he can do what he needs to do and that we can fill positions because there's an awful lot of work to do the last week of the window and it just all looks a little bit silly.
I've got an idea, and I don't know whether this is true or not. That I might have made up in my head, but I think they might do all three, and I think they might be thinking Mbaye helps Barcola settle in, and Mbaye helps Sarr settle in, and so because they're all mates. And this is out there, John. Do you think they'll do all three?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think on a more serious point, I think what's interesting is the Mbaye fee has seemingly gone too high, but this is a footballer who has like all the potential and has a ceiling, a much higher ceiling. It feels like Sarr, we are buying what we are going to get, and it's whether they've decided that getting someone with Premier League experience in the short term is much more beneficial to the manager than bringing in a footballer who will take time to both develop and to integrate within the squad and the league.
It's a bit like when people were floating the idea of loaning a sort of backup striker, isn't it? He's somebody who can do bits and come in, but if you've got your prospect behind him and you've got your big man on the left as well, then you can sort of treat Sarr as that sort of guy. He's not going to be here forever. He might do 1 or 2 seasons and then he goes, but he's facilitating a role and a job, and he's got goals behind him. So if you can come down from 50 million, then you could end up having Mbaye for 50, him for 40, and then
Barcola.
And then Barcola on top, yeah.
I'm laughing because I can't stop thinking about Richard Hughes being involved in both, and then he's just gone, fuck, Liverpool needs something. And I know what I can do next season. I can sign him.
But you can bring in two there.
His wages are.
You can bring in two there that's the price of one Minta, which is outrageous. I think they've absolutely screwed the pooch on Minta. I think that's done. I think Brighton have got all the power just to hang on and see how much they can get for him next season if they want to, or see if Liverpool want to hang on in January, which we won't. But I don't think you're going to get Tony Bloom climbing down from £80 million for him.
I've never heard that phrase before. Screwed the pooch.
Never heard that before.
No, I haven't either.
No. Interesting.
There you go.
I might try and drop it in.
Do you want the context, or just are you just going to try?
I'm
just say it some random lines.
It's just really polite for fucked it up, isn't it?
Yeah. Just don't say it on a dog walk is what I'm.
Well, that's what I did wonder.
That'd be my
whether
advice.
It was dog related. But yeah. Listen, we'll see. We'll follow it. I'm giddy, to be honest with you. I was starting to worry we weren't going to get anyone, and we still haven't got him. So who knows? Maybe he will still go somewhere else. But yeah, just need some footballers, need some wide lads, need some people who can kick it in the goal, maybe play a little bit of number 9 when the other fella needs a rest, and he seems to be that to me. So we'll leave it there. We'll finish on a positive. Anthony Corrigan likes his t-shirt.
Thanks so much. It's for those listening rather than watching, it's the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
Yeah.
And a black t-shirt with that. So thanks, Andy.
Andy Corrigan likes it.
Anthony, not Andy, sorry.
Thanks. I'm sure he'll forgive you.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot to Adam, to Craig, and to Kev, and for everyone who makes this production happen nowadays. It is quite a thing. That has been Unwrapped, the great lost part 2 of that show. Will always sort of be buried. It was more of the same, to be honest with you. But you got the first half, you got Don King, and you got us 4 getting slightly excited, maybe me more than most, about Ismaila Sarr. But Craig brought 2 others as well, so that's handy, innit? Up the Reds.